I'm going to begin by asking us to close our eyes, asking everyone to close your eyes. And just be aware of your breathing. Let go of trying to force it into any kind of patterns or repetitions. It'll repeat by itself. Just be aware of your body breathing. I'm going to ask 3 questions. The first is, are you breathing or are you being breathed? Do you see or are you being seen through? And are you living or are you being lived? What I'm going to share about today is the difference between each aspect of these realities. I'm going to begin by offering the Aramaic prayer of Yeshua, a combination from Matthew and Luke, Mattai and Luca in the Aramaic. Just let these sounds in and be aware of your breath. Awund washmead nit karashmach. Te malkuta. Nehwet sibian kaikana dwashmea up ba'ara. Hablan lach madesun kanan yaumana. Washwachan chaubein wachtahein. I can end up hanan shwakin lachayavein. Wila tahlan nitzione. Ila patsan min bisha. Metal de delaki malkuthik wahala watishbukta. La alam. Alamin. Amen. And slowly open your eyes. The core of everything that I share is about this more than any words that I can say to you over the next 40 minutes or so. And I could not be more, I don't know if serious is the word, but more intentional about that. That it's less about the concepts that we hold in our mind and more so about feeling. Those questions bring to mind something from the words of St. Francis of Assisi for me, where he says, what you are looking for is what is looking. Really let that in. What you are looking for is what is looking through you, in other words. I'm not going to be able to get to all of the 7 sacred lights that I speak of, but I'll be able to cap a few of them. The core of today's message, though, is about awakening heaven. And what exactly does that mean? Awakening heaven. I was actually just recently rereading a book from Marcus Borg where he talked about when he was a child, there was one thing that he hung up on all the time. He always had this gap between being told that God was in heaven and that God was omnipresent. Meaning that God was somewhere that it was implied that he wasn't, and yet somehow God was everywhere all the time. And there's actually something that Yeshua said in the Coptic. Coptic was an Egyptian language that was written with Greek letters plus a few added. And he said it in the Gospel of Thomas. He said, essentially, as you begin to awaken, the heavens and the earth will be rolled up in your presence. The heavens and earth will be rolled up in your presence. That word that was translated as rolled up means interspersed, threaded within into. Heaven. Satan fell from heaven. Where's heaven? Where did he say heaven was? He said the kingdom is within. In doing the work that I do, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge because we kind of get hung up on the words. And people will come to hear me or Rocco Erico, or whoever it may be, and they're looking for that one key, that one little bit, that little nugget of wisdom that'll somehow set them free. looking for that one thing, the next book, the next workshop, the next word. And they'll be so obsessed with the words coming out. All the while, what they're looking for is what's actually looking, and it's right here threaded into their presence. It's right here. Also in the Gospel of Thomas from the Coptic, I don't remember if it was disciples or just some people that were listening to Yeshua, and they said, "Can you tell us how our end will come?" He said, I can almost hear a chuckle, and his response was, "Have you found the beginning that now you're looking for the end?" Blessed are those who take their place in the beginning, for they will know the end and they will not taste death. Where's the beginning? Where's eternity? Let me ask you a question with that. When's the only moment in time that you know of that you can access eternity? When does eternity exist? When is the end of time? Right now. Now. Matthew 28:20, where it says, I am with you unto the end of the age. I am with you unto the end of the world. I am with you unto the end of time. If you look at that from the Aramaic that he spoke it within, he actually said, I am one with I. Ina imkun ena. I am one with I in every present moment in the anticipation of the ceasing of your conception of time. The ceasing of your conception of time. And that can only happen when? Now. So when's eternity? Now. And where did he say heaven was? It means within. It means near you. We start getting hung up on the words. Notice he never really said, he never gave a physical location. He said within, but that word that's within in Aramaic, those words, there's several different words that you can use, mean not only within, they mean much like what I said, rolled up into, threaded into, not far, nearer than your hand, right here. So he spoke of something that's right here. They also asked in Thomas, they said, when will the rest of the dead come about? The dead meaning the unconscious. Those people, when are those people that are unconsciously slogging through life over and over and over again, when will their repose? When will their awakening happen? When is the chance of their awakening, I should say? And he said, what you are looking for has already happened, but you do not comprehend it. Whenever they ask when the kingdom will come, he said it already happened. This is 2,000 years ago. He said it already happened. And we're looking for the kingdom now. We're still looking for it somewhere out there. Yet he said if you look in the sky, the birds are going to get there first. If you look in the water, the fish will get there first. But we hang up on those words. We hang up on the words. Now that's an issue, and it's not just Aramaic to English. It's any language going from one language to another. And I'm going to give you an example of that. I have a cousin, Deborah, who's been living in France since the 70s, and she's a potter and an artist, and she lives on the French Riviera, on the Mediterranean, one of those just idyllic movie-type lives. And let's say that I go to visit her, and I don't speak any French. I have soufflé, okay? Fromage, I think, means cheese. There's not much else there. Let's say I don't speak any French, and I make friends with a friend of hers who doesn't speak any English. So everything I say has to go through Deborah. It's got to go through that interpretation. From English into French, from French into English. And in some cases, of course, she's going to go, they don't have a word for that. There's no word for it. It happened a lot going from Aramaic into Greek. Now, we're not going to get into splitting hairs about which was written first, but at some point his teachings had to go from Aramaic into Greek. Now, and he would have been completely fluent in Hebrew because he was a Torah-abiding Jew. Now, let's say that after 2 weeks, this guy and I have this, we get as close as we can through the communication gap, and we become really good friends. And I turn to my cousin Deborah, tell him I said he's bad. And she thinks for a second, she turns and she says, Dale says you are no good. He says you are bad. Now that's a flawless, bulletproof, perfect black and white translation. But did she translate anything? Did she communicate anything of what I was trying to get across? No. As a matter of fact, she got the exact opposite of what I was trying to get across. Exact opposite. Think about the words we use today. Think about words like awful. What does awful mean? Ugh. Did you know that in the beginning of the 20th century, awful meant, oh, that's awful, beautiful, full of awe, terrific. Terrific's a great thing today, isn't it? Well, what about Perry Como when he said back in the 50s, the traffic is terrific in the song Home for the Holidays? What did that mean? Did it mean he loved it? No, not exactly. How about manifest? People are trying so hard to manifest today. Does anybody actually know what the word manifest means? Manifest is actually a Latin word. Another one of my passion language. It means obvious. Obvious. Think about that. We're trying so hard to manifest things. We're trying so hard, especially today, to create things when we're already creating all the time. And that which becomes manifest is that which is obvious to us. So if 2% of your being is focusing on this, and 98% of your being is exactly the opposite, let's say that more than anything else you want to see the positive and the light in this person. Your, who knows, mother-in-law, it could be anybody. I get along with my mother-in-law, so I mean I can sort of poke at that one, but there's someone you really want to focus on. Let's say it's somebody you work with. You want to focus on what you like about them. And then as soon as they walk into the room, what happens? Blotto. You go out. Or you're trying to manifest a car. It could be a physical thing. Who knows what it could be. But 2% is that 2% of the iceberg that's above the water. And you so want to feel the presence of God. And you're this iceberg floating in the ocean of God. And you want to feel the presence of God in your life. And I can't seem to find God. And you've got 2% that you're focusing on, yet 98% of your being is that whatever the overriding frequency is, and this is just pure physics, the overriding frequency, the overriding vibration or strength or power is that which is going to manifest in your life. That's what's obvious, regardless of what your words are saying. And that's why Yeshua said, let your yes be yes and let your no be no. Think about that. He also said, like in terms of things like praying, he said, do not what? He said not to do something. What was it? Believing in your heart and do not doubt. That word doubt in Aramaic, tetplug, means divide. Do not divide. Remain single. Single in being, single in vision. If thine eye be single, your body will be full of light. Rather than seeking the kingdom of heaven, or looking for it, realize that that's actually the natural state of your being. Probably one of the questions that I get asked the most is, what did he really say? I don't know. I wasn't there. I can tell you my interpretation. And when I do what I do, essentially, I shy away from the word scholar as much as possible. I had my toes really deep in that for a while, but I began to pull back because I noticed I'd get into a room of scholarly types, that's a gentle way of putting it, and they'd be arguing, like, what does it really say? This word, does it mean this? Does it mean this? Does it mean this? It's like, as an example, if I say the Aramaic word ha'imanuta means faith, I'm doing you a disservice because each of you are going to have a different interpretation of the word faith, and faith today is almost exactly the opposite of what faith meant 2,000 years ago. And a lot of these things can happen. If I stop at that, I'm doing a disservice. Now, but when I'm talking about what did he actually say, one of those things that I get the most is, what did he say when he said, I am? I am the way and the truth and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. Those are bold statements. It sounds like he thought he was God or something. My response is always immediate that he did not think he was God. He knew he was God. Knew. When he would make some statements, such as, Ina wabi chadchanan, I and the Father are one. I and the non-manifest are one. I and the birther are one and the same. He was speaking of himself. Ina means I, such as I, Dale. But when he made those other statements, the I am the way and the truth and the life, I am the bread of life, inana lachma dachai, he said something different. Now, when he's talking about himself, or if I'm talking about myself, Ina, can you see that? It means I, as in me, Dale, I, Yeshua, I. It's very simple. But when he used those other words, or those other phrases, he was speaking something slightly different. He actually said this twice. He said, Ina. Now let me ask you something. If Ina means I, what does Ina mean? Literal. If one of them means I, what does two of them mean? I, right? And it looks like this. When that second one comes in, it more accurately becomes I am. Or literal translation, I am I. I am I. It goes from ina, they drop the middle A sound, which you're not going to remember, and it just becomes inana. Inana lachma dahai. Now, when he said something like that, he wasn't talking about I, Jesus anymore. Now, if you look at this in the Greek, it's not there. If you look at this in the King James, it's not there. Anyone with sight, though, I'm not saying you can't find this in the King James. I'm just saying it's easier when you go to the original language of anything that was written. And that includes going to the Greek, because a lot of the stuff was originally written in Greek, too. But when you go to the original language, you're going to get things that have sort of been lost in translation. The Hebrew Bible that we have today from the King James was translated into Greek a couple of centuries prior to Yeshua walking the earth as the Septuagint, from Hebrew into Greek. The first line of Genesis, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, can be translated in excess of 300 plus ways, and that's one of them. So that's just something to think about. It's just something to think about, mull over in your mind. I said a little bit earlier that when he spoke of, in Matthew 28:20, I am with you unto the end of time, unto the end of the world, unto the end of the age, literally what it says is, I am one with I, meaning I, Yeshua, am one with Inanna, the I within the I inside of the I. And I'm not saying the eyeball inside of the eyeball, I'm saying awareness inside of awareness. That's why I asked you those questions in the beginning. Are you breathing or are you being breathed? How often do you actually ponder that? Are you seeing or are you being seen through? Are you living or are you being lived? All of his teachings centered on being lived. And your ego is going to fight that because it has to be in control. Being in control is cool. You know, the whole manifest game, that's all cool. You're always going to be manifesting. You're not actually losing your power. You're actually connecting into the power of life itself. I'm going to read you something else from, this is from the Gospel of Thomas. This is saying 77. Jesus said, it is I who am the light which is above them all. Now, let me stop right there for a second to say, when you see the word above in his teachings, it doesn't necessarily mean up. It means higher dimensions, higher states of awareness. Do you understand what I'm saying? Less manifest, essentially. It is I who am, I am the light which is above them all. It is I who am the all. From me did the all come forth, and unto me did the all extend. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. Was he talking about himself? Understanding what I was sharing with you about that I am that I am. Who was he talking about? Or who was he talking from would probably be more accurate for me to say. Where was that coming from? Your ego would love to clench onto that I am God thing. It would love it. It would relish it. I think of Shirley MacLaine back in the 80s on the Out on a Limb thing. She's out on the beach going, I am God. And everybody went, no, you're a lunatic. But think about that, though. Connecting into that. And we've all connected to it at one time or another. You would not be in this room. You've at least had the door slightly open. Slightly open. Now, there's something that, another thing, I keep coming back to Thomas today, but they asked Yeshua, they said, what's the sign of the living Father within you? He said it is movement and rest. What's an example of movement and rest or repose in your life? Movement and rest. Think about that. How many times have you seen the word breath in the Christian Jesus teachings? Goose egg. Never. You don't. Say, oh, I see them all the time when I look at it in Aramaic, Hebrew, whatever. I'm not asking about that. I'm asking about the standard teachings. The word spirit, spiritus, is a Latin word that he may have heard. He worked with his hands. He would have needed something like that to trade, to do his trade. He would have, and Latin was around, but the chances of him actually using Latin, it would be like me knowing the word whatever, for dog in Spanish. And my whole language, I was always speaking English, except whenever I said dog, I would say it in Spanish. And I don't even know what it is in Spanish. But you understand what I'm saying, the absurdity of that, of him using that word, spiritus, spiritus. But what if I told you that word in Aramaic is ruach in the Hebrew, that it also means breath? Breath. Now, if I say spirit to you, we all have different concepts of that. But if I say breath, we all have a very direct, intimate experience with breath. Think about that. You can actually go to much of the Yeshua teachings in the King James Bible, and if you feel like it in your book, scratch out the word spirit whenever you see it and put the word breath in its place. And it might not be breath in every single case. Such as when he said to Nicodemus, he said, you must be reborn of water and spirit. Think about water and breath, liquidity and breath, allowing. The Tao is like a river flowing home to the sea. Heaven's right here. If you're intent on trying to find it, what are you actually manifesting in your life? You're manifesting not having it. If you're looking for something, what's obvious is what's going to manifest. So if you're looking for something, you're affirming that you don't have it, and that's exactly what you're going to get, is a wider divide. And that's why he said, do not doubt, do not separate, do not divide. Remain single. Even the least among you can do all that I have done and even greater things. Wow. Oops, we forgot that. It had to be all about him. So heaven, where's heaven? It's right here. It's nearer than your hand. It's threaded into your presence. It's rolled up within your presence. How do you access heaven? It sounds very Eastern, doesn't it? Sounds almost, shall I say, Buddhist or Hindu? Somehow we lost a few years there from youth to adulthood for Yeshua. We lost those years there. And there's lots of books out there about where they are sure he went or what he was learning. But breath was all over the teachings, and it's still in the teachings today. I've got native Aramaic speaking friends, Assyrian friends, Iraqi Christian friends. And they say almost to a person, one of the things they'll say most often is that when breath got removed, the teachings were almost destroyed. So if the word is actually breath, and we access heaven through breath, what would that mean about the word Holy Spirit? Ruhad de Kudsha, breath. Holy breath. The word holy is kudsha, kadash in the Hebrew, which means emptiness, spacious, whole, all-encompassing, all-embracing. Let that in. The all-embracing breath of God. I said in the beginning, Marcus Borg had an issue with the difference between God being in heaven and God being everywhere at once. But where's the breath of God? Feel that out. Your breath is the breath of God. Your breath activates the breath of God. What's the only one unforgivable sin we were told by Yeshua? There was one. What was it? It was blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. The word blaspheme in Aramaic means to constrict or to cut off from. To what? To stop breathing. To cut your breath off. What's the first thing that happens when that person walks into the room that you don't like? You're so spiritual, but this one comes in and the first thing you do is what? You stop breathing. A big issue comes up in your life that you can't handle. You heard that someone was just killed. What happens? You stop breathing. That's blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. It's something that happens for us as humans. It's the way it is. You're sinning over and over again. That doesn't mean you're a bad person doomed to hell. Not that we even know what that means anymore. But you stop breathing, and when your breath stops, the breath of God cannot move through you. And trust me, the breath of God is the only breath that's moving through you. But through your breathing, that's how the Holy Spirit does its work and allows that almost fictitious reality that we lay over truth That's how that's able to move away. And we reconnect to that I within the I, the Inanna. Moses heard something back from that non-consumed burning bush. What was it he heard? He heard Eah, Ashar, Eah in Hebrew, which means I am that I am. I shall be that I shall be. I am becoming that I am becoming. I am flowering that I am flowering. I am expanding that I am expanding. There's so many ways to put that. He heard essentially I am. Moses was seeking the name of God, and he heard back I am. So what's the name of God? I am. Who's God? I am. I could see people seeing this going, and who is that? Who's that's actually having the reaction? Yeshua said something in a few places. He said, that in which you judge another, you are guilty of practicing. That in which you judge another, you are guilty of practicing. That which you measure unto another is measured unto you. But he called him something. What was the word that he called him? He started talking about the speck and the plank, the mote and the beam. Hypocrite. What does hypocrite mean? Another one of those words we've kind of lost touch with. Talk out of both sides of your mouth. That's pretty close, actually. Hypocrite, people will often say one thing, do another. Do as I say, not as I do. Hypocrite means, it's the same word as veil. Matthew 27:51, the veil of the temple, Haikla, the embodiment of energy, was rent in twain from top to bottom, highest to lowest, to most conscious to most unconscious. Veil. Think of that veil. It means doorway, doorkeeper. It means sake. For your sake, Johnny, don't run out into the road. What does that mean? For your safety, or your apparent safety in my eyes. It also means person. Person actually comes from the Latin persona. Does anybody know what persona means? Mask. Hypocrite means mask. So when he said hypocrite, that was not a judgment of him saying you're whatever, a loser, anything like that. He was saying that's not the I am that's speaking. That's your mask that's speaking. And mask is not necessarily something that's bad. When he used the word I, Jesus, he was speaking of that human shell, which is the mask. But what he was always talking about was getting back to the I within the I. That is heaven. It's right here all the time if you can just be aware of that. He said it came, it's already happened, but you don't comprehend it. He said that 2,000 years ago. Anything happening for you? A lot of it, usually before I start speaking, I'll say, let go of trying to comprehend what I'm going to be saying over this next, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and just be aware of your breathing and the feeling, what you're feeling inside. Because if you try to comprehend, your brain's just going to start shutting down and imploding, and it's just going to lay down. And you're either going to fall asleep, which is part of the process when the expansion happens, or you're just going to go blotto, and you'll have that sensation of 10 minutes, you have no idea what someone just said. Just 10 minutes, you were gone. But if you can be aware of what's happening inside of you as someone's speaking, and that includes the loved ones in your life. It doesn't have to be someone in this kind of an atmosphere. How many of us are good listeners, active listeners? It's good to be able to say that. That's great. Most people can't. They're waiting to speak. And you wonder why you don't feel the presence of God in your life. You wonder why you can't find heaven and why you think you have to die to get to heaven. Little side note, there's not a clear word for afterlife in ancient Aramaic. The word bashmaya meant the world that is yet to come, which just means future. We look at life as the opposite of death, which it is not. There is no opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth, that peeking in and out. Eternity here and now, eternity here and now. Yet, even though we're peeking in and out of form, eternity is always there and it's always accessible. Eternity is life. And it's always there. It's always right here. There is no opposite of life. You pick that up? People don't usually think about that. I am the bread of life. Inana lachma dachai. He was born, we are told, in Beit Lachem. Beit means house. Lachem means bread. He was born in a house of bread. Wow, big deal. But Beit is the second letter of the Aramaic alphabet. It doesn't mean house like a frame necessarily. It means housing. In other words, there's something inside the house that is being. Something is being housed. It's the differentiation between inside and outside. The first letter, Aleph, means everything, the all. The second letter means inside, outside, meaning there's a difference between what's inside and that which is outside, or at least that's what we perceive. It could also mean being, a being of bread, which sounds like a Hollywood movie or something. But the word bread, lachma, what it truly means is sustenance from within, divine sustenance from within, insight, understanding, realization. He was born within a being of insight, realization, sustenance from within. It's always there. Heaven's always there. The manna for Moses and the Israelites fell from where? Heaven. Where's heaven? He said it's not just up there, because if you say it's up there, the birds will get there first. It's within. Does that mean they had pita bread shooting out of their chest? Not exactly. Manna in Aramaic, with that word, and it's an Aramaic word, it literally means, what is it? It's an inquiry. It means, again, with lachma, true sustenance from within. That you're looking at something out here thinking that's the sustenance. But yet what you're trying to, like the food that you're bringing to your mouth, that's not what's sustaining you. What's sustaining you is not the food. It's the energy in the food, which is exactly the energy that's inside of you. So when the manna fell from heaven, it doesn't necessarily mean that rolls were falling and knocking them in the skull. It means they connected into the source of life itself. Now relate this to what I said about hypocrite, about mask. What's the root of all evil? I believe it was 1 Timothy. What was it we were told was the root of all evil? People usually say that money is the root of all evil. It's not quite what it says. It says the love of money. That word love, rahmah, means to relate with completely, to wholly relate with, to be absolutely on a single level, single footing, coming from the same center with. Money is the root of all evil. But the word money there is kespa. In Aramaic, that word means silver, gold, denarii. What it really means is the illusion of a rate of physical exchange. What does that mean? It means that believing that I can give you something that will make you more than you already are, make you believe that you're more than you are, or that somehow I can take from you that'll make you feel that you're less than you are, or less than you were. It could be money. It could be a concept, a belief, a book, self-worth, a person, a possession. Do you understand that? Believing that there's two, but Yeshua said, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. He kept saying to be single, do not divide. Putting your faith in something that's somehow going to add or take from you, that's actually what doubt means. It means to divide. Yet he said, if thine eye be single, your body will be full of light. That light is heaven. That light is the presence of God. That light is Inanna, the I am that I am. Recognize that in those moments in your life when you stop breathing, when something's happening, recognize what's happening. You're identifying with this out here. You feel that you're going to lose something. There's something you're going to lose. Something's going to be exposed. Something's going to be laid out bare all over the floor. When it said that Yeshua and Elijah and Moses and all these different people in the Bible were in the desert, that word in Aramaic, madbra, it means wilderness. It means wasted. It means naked, bare, a raw, vulnerable state of being. It's in here. The wilderness is in here. Yes, there's a symbology of wilderness. But that word madbra, what that really means is they went to that space in their being where you're not used to looking. And when you're living from that space in your being and you're living from that unconsciously, that's why you're not in heaven. Because you're believing in my problem, believing in my issue, believing in why I can't see eye to eye with you. You picking that up? And that's exactly, you know how it's like we're in that new agey stage now. It's been going on for about 20 years where you meet people who say, oh, I am light and I acknowledge only the light and I can't, I won't talk about that. I won't talk about what's going on in the world and I won't talk about this and I won't talk about that. And yet if you say just the right thing to them, they'll completely tear your head off. You just got just the right thing. There's something that Dr. Michael Rice has said to me a few times. He said, if you're going to play John the Baptist, you got to know how to do two things. One, you got to know when to hold up the mirror, and two, you got to know when to duck. And I'm really good at holding up the mirror. I'm getting better, a lot better at ducking now. But think about that. What does light actually mean? What does it mean? It means you don't get rid of darkness by closing your eyes to it. Because what does that create? More darkness. You don't get rid of darkness by going into that space where the darkness is and trying to push it out and say it doesn't exist. Because you still get more darkness. What do? You turn on consciousness. You turn on the light. That's it. Think about that. You turn on the light. There is nothing that is hidden that will not become manifest, obvious, from the Gospel of Thomas again. Nothing hidden will not become manifest. He also says, that which you bring forth from within you will save you. That which you do not bring forth from within you will destroy you. Those are pretty rich words. So let's look at this another way. We're looking so much for the kingdom of heaven. We've lived, let's say, 40, 45 years in a completely black room, and it's dark. And we're so sure that the fire of hell is everywhere right now and the world is falling apart. We're so sure of that. Does anybody know what the word revelation means? Does anybody know what the word apocalypse means? That's a Greek word. That's an easier one. It means lifting the veil. It doesn't mean everything's falling apart, although falling apart is part of the process. But we're so sure of that. Let's say that we live 40, 45 years in a dark room, black room, and all of a sudden you get up one morning and you realize that there's the slightest pinprick of light coming through a crack in the door, just the slightest pinprick. That's an awakening. It's amazing. Your life can be transformed and you become solely or wholly focused probably on increasing that light in your life. But let's put it this way. Let's say that you've been in a darkened room for 45 years, or maybe a race has been in darkness for thousands of years on the whole, and all of a sudden there was ones who were awakening, and it got to a certain percentage point where the door just swung open. What are you going to interpret that light as when it comes flying into the dark room? What's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to cover your eyes and you're going to say, oh my God, it's the fire of hell. Aren't you? You're not going to like it. It's going to hurt. It's going to burn. And I'd love to go more into this, but I don't have the time for it. I would say, look into Marcus 9, from right around 47 through 50 in Mark 9, and look at what's there and realize, I would love to have the time maybe to come back and do that, but there's no such thing as the fire of hell. There's only the light of God. I want you to get that. It's something I want you to understand. If you resist the light of God, it becomes the fire of hell. It's in the words talehun in Aramaic, Ouroboros in Greek, Ouroboros in Latin. It's a worm, a serpent, a dragon that consumes its own tail and emits light or fire. Now, how do I relate that to you? Imagine you're holding a baby in the first 20 minutes of life, that living, breathing being. What does that feel like? It feels very eternal. It's light. Do you understand what I'm saying? You feel that eternity, light, life coming back upon itself and emitting light. Let's look at that on the other side. Let's say, cancel the thought, the death of a child that you brought into the world, and that child dies. It's going to feel what? It's going to feel very eternal, isn't it? And there's also going to be an emission of light. But what you're probably going to do, at least at first, is interpret that light as fire, because you don't want to look at what it's trying to show you is inside of yourself. The reason for the pain is because you're harboring something in there. What was it James Allen said in As a Man Thinketh? What is the meaning of fighting against circumstances? It is continually revolting against an effect without, all the while nourishing its cause in your heart. All of those times when you feel like you're being squeezed and you can't find heaven, you're being squeezed, you can't find the presence of God. Heaven's there, God's there. If you can allow the experience to move through your system, to move through, this too shall pass. What's causing the pain is the differentiation between the mask and who you truly are. The more you deny the mask, the more strength you give it. How do I know that? I know it. There's no exception to that. Let's try something. Don't think about Barack Obama. Who's everybody not thinking about? Don't think about Michael Jackson. I'm not thinking about him. Who is it you're not thinking about? In order not to think about it, you have to think about it. When you try not to look at those aspects in your life that you don't like, and you don't look at them, you're confirming that you want darkness in your life. Because you don't know the I am that you are that looks directly at it. And it's kind of like I've been getting my kids into the Three Stooges. And I'm not sure it's a good thing or not, but something that I love. I hear whoop, whoop, whoop all the time in the house. But it's like they're the Three Stooges, Abbott and Costello, and they're going through the desert. And they're just running and running, and they haven't had food or water in days. And all of a sudden they're here in the desert, and there's women, and they're feeding each other grapes, and there's waterfalls and fountains, and it's so beautiful. I think Curly calls it a mirage. And they go running toward it, and they go to dive, and what happens? They get a mouthful of dirt because it didn't exist. That's exactly what the mask is. Carl Jung said, ego is anything that is not God. Only God exists. Ego is anything that is not God. Only God exists. But if you deny that it exists, you're actually recreating it by not looking at it. Understand that? When you try not to look at it, you're recreating it more intensely than if you looked directly at it. I am the all. From me does the all extend, and unto me does it extend to the I am. So where are you living your life? Are you living it from this? Or are you living from the I am? How do you live from the I am? Breathe. If there's anything I can get across, forget all the Aramaic stuff and be empty in your breath. The first beatitude, empty and home in your breath.